The gunshot that shattered the late afternoon calm of Willow Creek also shattered Olivia Reed's world, though she wouldn't realize it until the next morning when the sheriff pounded on her door. The year was 1878, and in this dusty frontier town nestled in the Colorado Territory, a woman's reputation was as fragile as morning dew under the harsh western sun. "Miss Reed," Sheriff Mills stated grimly, his weathered face a mask of formality beneath his gray, streaked mustache, "I'm here to take you in for questioning regarding the death of Mr. Everett Daly." Olivia's hand flew to her throat, her hazel eyes widening in shock. "Mr. Daly is dead. Shot through the heart behind the Lucky Spur Saloon last night," the sheriff confirmed, studying her reaction with narrowed eyes. "Several witnesses place you arguing with him earlier in the evening." The color drained from Olivia's face. At 22, she had worked as a schoolteacher in Willow Creek for nearly 2 years, building a respectable life for herself after fleeing an arranged marriage back east. Though she lived alone, something that already raised eyebrows, she had maintained a spotless reputation through diligent work and proper behavior, until now. I did speak with him," she admitted, "but I certainly didn't kill him. Sheriff Mills, you know me." "What I know," he replied, "is that a man is dead and you were one of the last to see him alive. I need you to come with me now." As she was escorted down the main street, Olivia felt the weight of stares from doorways and windows. By noon, the jail had become a gathering place for the curious and judgmental alike, their whispers carrying through the barred window of her cell. Always knew there was something not right about her, living alone like that, too proud for her own good, turning down decent proposals. Heard she was meeting Daly in secret, shameful business. Olivia sat on the hard bench, clutching her shawl around her shoulders despite the summer heat. She had indeed argued with Everett Daly, the married owner of the general store, who had cornered her behind the schoolhouse the previous week with unwanted advances. When his hands had become insistent, she'd slapped him hard across the face and threatened to expose his behavior. Yesterday, she'd confronted him about spreading rumors that she'd led him on, but she hadn't killed him. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Sheriff Mills returned with Mayor Thornton, whose florid face bore the unmistakable expression of a man who saw political opportunity in scandal. "Miss Reed," the mayor began, "this is a most serious situation. The town council has already convened an emergency meeting. Given the nature of your relationship with the deceased." "There was no relationship," Olivia interrupted firmly. The mayor continued as if she hadn't spoken. "And the moral example expected of our schoolteacher, we've determined that a public hearing will be necessary. Until then, you are relieved of your teaching duties. You're firing me before I've even had a trial." "This isn't Boston, Miss Reed," the sheriff said quietly. "Out here, a community decides what it can tolerate." 2 days later, they released her from jail due to lack of evidence. The murder weapon hadn't been found, and she had no powder residue on her hands when arrested, but her reputation lay in tatters. Parents withdrew their children from her classroom. The boarding house where she took her meals asked her to eat in her room. The general store, now run by Daly's widow, refused to serve her. Olivia found herself virtually alone, sustained only by the kindness of Mrs. Abernathy, an elderly widow who brought her food and warned her of the town council's plans. "They're setting up for something awful, dear," Mrs. Abernathy whispered one evening. "A public shaming right in the town square. Mayor Thornton's idea, says it'll cleanse the community. They've got some trumped-up charge about moral indecency." "They can't do that," Olivia protested. "This isn't the Salem witch trials. This is the frontier, child. They can do whatever the majority agrees to." On the morning the town gathered for her public shaming, Olivia stood on the wooden platform hastily erected in the town square, her head held high despite the tears threatening to spill. She wore her best dress, a simple blue cotton with white trim, refusing to appear beaten even as Mayor Thornton read out a list of accusations about her unseemly behavior and corrupting influence. The townspeople gathered around, some looking uncomfortable, others nodding in righteous agreement. Children peeked from behind their mothers' skirts, while men removed their hats in the pretense of solemnity that barely masked their curiosity. It was then that a horse's hoofbeats interrupted the mayor's speech, the rhythm slowing as the rider approached the edge of the crowd. People turned to look, then parted to reveal a tall man astride a magnificent chestnut stallion. Olivia recognized him instantly. Ryker Hayes had arrived in Willow Creek 3 months ago, establishing himself as a skilled rancher who kept mostly to himself. He'd purchased the old Mackenzie property outside town and had begun raising horses. Their paths had crossed only a few times, once when he'd borrowed a book from the small school library, and again when they'd exchanged polite greetings at church. Now he guided his horse directly to the platform, his expression unreadable beneath his wide-brimmed black hat. The crowd fell silent as he dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jangling against the packed dirt. "What's the meaning of this?" Mayor Thornton demanded, clutching his papers. Ryker removed his hat, revealing sun-streaked brown hair and piercing blue eyes that surveyed the gathering with barely concealed contempt. "I came to see what kind of town treats one of its own this way," he replied, his voice carrying across the square. "Seems I've found my answer." "This doesn't concern you, Hayes," Sheriff Mills warned. "This is town business." "Is it now?" Ryker's gaze swept over the crowd before settling on Olivia, something in his eyes softened momentarily. "You all gathered here to watch her shame," no one spoke. A few looked down, unable to meet his direct stare. Ryker stepped onto the platform, moving to stand beside Olivia. "Then watch me marry her." A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Olivia herself turned to him in shock, certain she'd misheard. "Mr. Hayes," she whispered urgently, "what are you doing?" Offering a choice, he replied quietly, for her ears alone. "You don't deserve this, Miss Reed. I respect you too much to see you treated this way." Then, louder for all to hear, "Miss Reed is an honorable woman." "I'd be proud to call her my wife." Mayor Thornton sputtered in outrage. "This is highly irregular. You can't simply—" "Can't I?" Ryker challenged, his hand moving to rest lightly on the gun at his hip, not a threat, but a reminder. "Last I checked, a man and woman can marry if they choose." "Or does Willow Creek have different laws than the rest of the territory?" The mayor fell silent, calculating the shifting mood of the crowd. "Miss Reed," Ryker said, turning to face her fully, "I know this is sudden, but I'm offering you my name, my protection, and my respect. The choice is yours." Olivia's mind raced. She barely knew this man, yet in this moment, he was offering her something no one else had: dignity. She looked past him at the faces of people she'd taught, served, and lived alongside for 2 years, people now eager to see her humiliated. Then back at Ryker Hayes, whose eyes held no judgment, only a steady certainty. "Yes," she found herself saying, her voice stronger than she expected. "Yes, I accept." Within an hour, they stood before the reluctant Reverend Taylor, who performed the briefest wedding ceremony in Willow Creek's history. By sundown, Olivia had packed her few belongings and ridden away from town beside her new husband, leaving behind a community divided between shock, outrage, and the uncomfortable stirrings of shame. The Hayes Ranch house came into view just as the last light faded from the sky, a sturdy 2-story structure with a wide porch and windows glowing with welcoming lamplight. "My foreman's wife must have lit the lamps," Ryker explained as he helped Olivia down from her horse. "The Garcias live in the smaller house beyond the barn. They're good people." "Mr. Hayes," Olivia began. "Ryker," he corrected gently. "I reckon you should use my given name now." "Ryker," she amended, feeling strange addressing him so familiarly. "I don't know how to thank you for what you did today, but I need to understand. Why?" He considered her question as he carried her trunk up the porch steps. "Let's get you settled first. You must be exhausted." The interior of the house surprised her with its comfort and cleanliness. Simple but well-crafted furniture filled the main room, bookshelves lined one wall, and a large stone fireplace dominated another. It wasn't the rough bachelor quarters she had expected. "Mrs. Garcia keeps things in order," Ryker explained, noticing her expression. "I'm not much for decorating, but I like things clean and functional." He showed her to a bedroom upstairs, clearly the master bedroom with its large four-poster bed and adjoining washroom. "You'll stay here," he said. "I'll take the room across the hall." Relief and confusion mingled in Olivia's response. "But we're married, on paper," he agreed, setting down her trunk. "But I meant what I said about respect, Miss Reed Olivia. I didn't rescue you from one difficult situation just to put you in another. This marriage is for your protection, nothing more." "You married me to protect a woman you barely know," she said, still trying to understand. Ryker leaned against the doorframe, studying her with those penetrating blue eyes. "I know enough. I know you're kind to children who others ignore. I've seen how you treat everyone with the same respect, regardless of their station. And I know what it's like to be judged unfairly by people who don't know the whole story." He straightened, preparing to leave her to settle in. "We can discuss the particulars tomorrow. For now, get some rest. There's food downstairs when you're hungry." "Ryker," she called as he turned to go. "Thank you, truly." He nodded once, then left, closing the door softly behind him. Alone in the unfamiliar room, Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, the events of the day catching up with her in a rush of emotion. She had woken this morning a condemned woman and would sleep tonight a married one, to a virtual stranger. Yet as she unpacked her few possessions, her mother's hairbrush, her books, the sampler she'd stitched as a girl, she felt something she hadn't expected. Hope. Whatever Ryker Hayes' reasons, he had given her a chance to start anew. She only hoped she wouldn't come to regret accepting it. Dawn arrived with the sounds of a working ranch horses nickering, men calling to one another, the distant lowing of cattle. Olivia dressed carefully in her second-best dress, a green calico that brought out the gold flecks in her hazel eyes, and pinned her chestnut hair in a simple knot at the nape of her neck. Downstairs, she found Ryker at the kitchen table, studying papers spread before him. He rose when she entered, setting aside his work. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I expected," she admitted. "Everything considered." "Maria, Mrs. Garcia left breakfast keeping warm on the stove," he said, gesturing toward the cast iron range. "Coffee's fresh, too." As Olivia served herself eggs and biscuits, Ryker cleared his throat. "I thought we might talk about arrangements." "Yes, of course." She took the seat across from him, back straight, hands folded in her lap as if she were at a job interview rather than breakfast with her husband. "This place needs a proper mistress," he began. "I've been getting by, but there's much that could be improved with a woman's touch. If you're willing, I'd like you to take charge of the household, ordering supplies, planning meals, that sort of thing." "I can do that," she agreed, relief flooding through her. He was offering her a role, a purpose. "Good," he nodded, seemingly pleased. "You'll have your own allowance for household expenses and personal items. The Garcias will continue their work. He manages the ranch hands. She cooks and does the heavier cleaning, but you'll oversee things." "And what about us?" Olivia asked carefully. This marriage, Ryker met her gaze steadily. "I meant what I said yesterday. This is a marriage of convenience for your protection. I won't expect anything from you that you're not willing to give, but people will talk if we don't." She trailed off, blushing. "Let them talk," he said firmly. "What happens between us is our business alone." They settled into an uneasy routine over the following days. Olivia found purpose in organizing the household, cataloging supplies, and planning improvements to the vegetable garden. Ryker spent his days working with the horses or meeting with cattle buyers, returning for supper each evening where they engaged in polite, if somewhat stilted, conversation. At night, they retired to their separate bedrooms, a respectable arrangement that nonetheless left Olivia staring at the ceiling, wondering about the enigmatic man across the hall. On her 5th day at the ranch, a wagon arrived from town carrying a delivery from the mercantile. Olivia froze when she saw the driver, Tom Wilson, one of the men who had stood in the front row during her public shaming. "Mrs. Hayes," he said awkwardly, removing his hat. "Got your order here." "Thank you, Mr. Wilson," she replied coolly. "You can unload it on the porch." As he brought the crates and barrels, he kept glancing at her nervously. Finally, he blurted, "Town's talking about what happened. Some folks feel mighty ashamed about how things went." "Do they now?" Olivia couldn't keep the edge from her voice. "Yes, especially since." He hesitated. Since what, Mr. Wilson? Since they arrested the real killer 2 days ago, drifter named Chambers. Had Daly's watch and wallet on him when they caught him trying to sell them in Silverton. The news hit Olivia like a physical blow. They had found the real murderer, yet not one person had bothered to come tell her or offer an apology. I see, she said, her voice tight. Thank you for the information. After Wilson left, she sat on the porch steps, trembling with anger and vindication. That's where Ryker found her an hour later, returning from the north pasture. Olivia, what's wrong? She told him about Wilson's news, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. They knew I was innocent all along. They just wanted someone to blame, and I was convenient a woman alone who didn't bend to their expectations. Ryker sat beside her, removing his gloves. People fear what they don't understand. A woman making her own way challenges their notion of how things should be. Is that why you helped me? She asked suddenly. Because you understand being misunderstood. He was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, 7 years ago, I was accused of stealing horses in Montana territory. Spent 3 months in jail before the real thieves were caught. By then, my name was mud, my business ruined. I had to start over. I'm sorry that happened to you, Olivia said softly. It taught me something important, he continued. Justice isn't always served by the law or by public opinion. Sometimes it has to come from individuals willing to stand up for what's right. He looked at her directly. When I saw you on that platform, head high despite everything, I recognized something in you worth protecting. The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within her. For the first time since their hasty wedding, Olivia began to see Ryker not just as her rescuer, but as a man with his own painful past and principles. That evening at supper, the conversation flowed more naturally. She told him about her childhood in Boston, her decision to become a teacher, and her journey west after refusing a marriage arranged by her stepfather to a man 3 times her age. You're braver than you give yourself credit for, Ryker observed. Most women wouldn't have made that journey alone. I didn't feel brave, Olivia admitted. Just desperate. Courage often looks like desperation to the person living it, he replied with a small smile. As the days stretched into weeks, a comfortable partnership developed between them. Olivia brought order and warmth to the ranch house, while Ryker included her in decisions about the property, valuing her opinions and ideas. They took to eating breakfast together before dawn and sharing the events of their day over supper. Sometimes in the evenings, one would read aloud while the other mended tack or darned socks. Yet still they retired to separate bedrooms. Their marriage unconsummated despite the growing attraction, Olivia felt toward her husband an attraction she carefully concealed, uncertain if he felt the same. Summer was giving way to autumn when the first visitors from town appeared at the ranch. Olivia was in the garden harvesting late tomatoes when she heard the sound of approaching horses. Looking up, she recognized Reverend Taylor and his wife, along with Mrs. Abernathy, the only person from Willow Creek who had shown her kindness during her ordeal. Ryker emerged from the barn to greet them, his stance protective as he positioned himself slightly in front of Olivia. Reverend Taylor, he acknowledged with a nod. Ladies, what brings you out to the ranch? The Reverend dismounted awkwardly, his city background evident in his movements. Mr. Hayes, Mrs. Hayes, we've come to extend an invitation. The Harvest Festival is next Saturday, and we hoped you both would attend. Olivia tensed, memories of her last public appearance in Willow Creek still raw. That's mighty thoughtful, Ryker replied, his tone neutral, but I'm not sure my wife would be comfortable, given recent events. That's precisely why we're here, Mrs. Taylor interjected, her round face earnest. The town, well, many people regret how things were handled. This would be an opportunity to make amends. Olivia, dear, Mrs. Abernathy added gently, I wouldn't ask if I thought you'd be mistreated. There's been a real change of heart since the truth came out. Olivia looked to Ryker, who met her gaze with silent support. Whatever she decided, he would back her. Thank you for the invitation, she said finally. We'll consider it. After they departed, Olivia and Ryker sat on the porch swing, discussing whether to accept. You don't have to go, Ryker assured her. You don't owe them anything. "It's not about owing," she replied thoughtfully. "It's about whether I want to give them power over me by staying away or take back my dignity by returning on my own terms." He studied her with admiration. "Whatever you decide, I'll be right beside you." The certainty in his voice gave her courage. "Then we'll go, together." The morning of the harvest festival dawned clear and cool. Olivia dressed with particular care in a new burgundy dress Ryker had ordered from Denver, her hair arranged in an elegant style Mrs. Garcia had helped her achieve. When she descended the stairs, Ryker waited in the foyer, looking handsome in a black suit coat over a crisp white shirt. His eyes widened appreciatively as she approached. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice lower than usual. "Thank you," she replied, a blush warming her cheeks. "You clean up rather well yourself." The drive to town in the buggy was quiet, both lost in their own thoughts. As they approached Willow Creek, Olivia's stomach tightened with anxiety. Ryker seemed to sense her tension, covering her gloved hand with his. "Remember," he said, "we can leave any time you want." The town square had been transformed for the festival, with tables laden with food, bunting hanging from storefronts, and a small band setting up near the newly built gazebo. As Ryker helped Olivia down from the buggy, people noticed their arrival, conversations faltering momentarily before resuming with forced normalcy. "Mrs. Hayes," Mrs. Abernathy approached first, embracing Olivia warmly. "I'm so glad you came. You must try my apple pie. It won first prize last year." Her genuine welcome broke some of the tension, and gradually others approached, offering cautious greetings that grew more relaxed as Olivia responded with gracious composure. Ryker remained close, his hand often resting protectively at the small of her back. Mayor Thornton notably kept his distance, though Olivia caught him watching them with a sour expression. Mrs. Daly, the widow, was also absent, having moved to Denver after selling the general store. As the afternoon progressed, Olivia found herself surrounded by former students and their parents, many offering awkward but seemingly sincere apologies for believing the worst of her. "We miss you at the school, Miss Reed, Mrs. Hayes," said 10-year-old Sarah Williams. "The new teacher doesn't explain things as well as you did." "That's very kind of you to say, Sarah," Olivia replied, genuinely touched. When the dancing began, Ryker surprised her by leading her to the area cleared for couples. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Hayes?" It was the first time they had been so close, his hand warm at her waist as they moved to the music. Olivia was acutely aware of his proximity, the clean scent of his shaving soap, the gentle pressure of his fingers against hers. "You're a better dancer than I expected, Mr. Hayes," she teased, trying to hide her flustered reaction. "My mother insisted I learn," he replied with a small smile, "said no son of hers would stomp around like a buffalo at social gatherings." As they danced, Olivia noticed the speculative glances from townspeople. "They're watching us," she murmured. "Let them," Ryker said, drawing her slightly closer. "Maybe they'll learn something about standing by the people you care about." His words sent a flutter through her chest. Did that mean he cared for her as more than just a responsibility? Later, as they stood near the refreshment table, Sheriff Mills approached, looking uncomfortable. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, removing his hat. "I owe you an apology. I should have investigated more thoroughly before making assumptions." "I hope you can forgive me." Olivia regarded him steadily. "Thank you for your apology, Sheriff. I accept it, though I won't forget what happened." He nodded soberly. "That's fair, more than fair." He turned to Ryker. "You've got a remarkable wife, Hayes." "I'm well aware," Ryker replied, a note of pride in his voice that warmed Olivia from within. As the sun began to set, Reverend Taylor made an announcement from the gazebo steps. "Before we conclude our festival with the lantern lighting, I'd like to take a moment to right a wrong. Mrs. Hayes, Olivia, on behalf of the town council and the citizens of Willow Creek, I formally apologize for the mistreatment you suffered. We failed you as neighbors and as Christians, and we ask your forgiveness." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Olivia felt Ryker's supportive presence beside her as all eyes turned their way, awaiting her response. She stepped forward, her voice clear in the evening air. Reverend Taylor, citizens of Willow Creek, your apology is acknowledged. But more important than words is how we treat each other going forward. Let what happened to me be a lesson in the dangers of gossip and hasty judgment. I bear no ill will, but I will not forget, nor should you." A respectful silence followed her words. Then Mayor Thornton, who had remained conspicuously quiet throughout the day, pushed forward through the crowd. "Fine words," he said, his voice slightly slurred from too much cider. "But let's not forget you were seen repeatedly in Daly's company." "Where there's smoke, that's enough, Thornton," Ryker interrupted, stepping beside Olivia. "My wife has shown more grace than you deserve." "Your wife," the mayor scoffed, "married in haste to avoid disgrace. Everyone knows what kind of marriage that is." Before anyone could react, Mrs. Abernathy moved forward, her small frame vibrating with indignation. "Harold Thornton, you should be ashamed. These good people came today at our invitation, and this is how you behave. I've known you since you were in short pants, and I've never been so disappointed." Several other townspeople voiced their agreement, and the mayor, realizing he had lost his audience, retreated in sullen silence. As lanterns were lit around the square, casting a golden glow over the gathering, Ryker turned to Olivia. "Ready to go home, home." The word filled her with longing not just for the ranch house, but for what it represented: safety, respect, and the possibility of something deeper with the man beside her. "Yes," she said softly, "let's go home." They rode back mostly in silence, the stars emerging in the clear autumn sky. When they arrived at the ranch, Ryker helped her down from the buggy, his hands lingering at her waist. "You were magnificent today," he said, his voice low. "The way you handled yourself with such dignity." "I had good reason to be strong," Olivia replied, looking up at him. "I was representing us both." Something shifted in Ryker's expression, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. "Olivia, I need to tell you something." He took a deep breath. "I didn't just marry you out of a sense of justice or to protect you. From the first time I saw you at the schoolhouse, reading to those children under the oak tree, I couldn't look away. Your kindness, your intelligence, your strength, I admired you from afar long before that day in the town square." Olivia's heart quickened. "Why didn't you say anything?" "I didn't think a refined, educated woman like you would look twice at a rough rancher with a questionable past," he admitted. "And after we married, I didn't want you to feel obligated. I wanted to give you time, space to adjust without pressure." "And now," she whispered, hardly daring to hope. In answer, Ryker bent his head and kissed her gently at first, then with growing intensity as she responded, her arms sliding around his neck. When they finally drew apart, both breathless, Ryker rested his forehead against hers. "I've fallen in love with you, Olivia Hayes. If you need more time, I understand, but I want a real marriage with you in every way." "Ryker," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "I started falling for you the moment you stepped onto that platform and offered me your name. Every day since has only deepened those feelings." He kissed her again, lifting her into his arms to carry her into the house and up the stairs to the bedroom they would now truly share. Later, as they lay entwined in the darkness, Olivia marveled at how a day that had begun with apprehension had ended with such perfect happiness. "What are you thinking?" Ryker asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That sometimes what seems like the end of everything can actually be the beginning," she replied, "if you hadn't been there that day." "But I was," he said simply, "and now we're here together." As autumn deepened into winter, Olivia and Ryker's relationship blossomed into a true partnership, their initial arrangement transformed by genuine love and mutual respect. Word spread throughout the county about the impressive Hayes Horse Ranch and its capable mistress, who soon became known for her hospitality and wisdom as much as for her unusual entry into marriage. In December, Olivia received a letter from the school board, offering her position back with increased pay and a formal apology. After discussing it with Ryker, she declined the full-time role but agreed to help train the new teacher and perhaps offer advanced lessons to older students once weekly. "Are you sure?" Ryker asked as they sat before the fire one snowy evening. "I know teaching means a lot to you." "It does," she acknowledged, "but my life is here now. Besides, she added with a mysterious smile, I may soon have my hands full with a student of my own. It took a moment for her meaning to register. When it did, Ryker's expression transformed from confusion to wonder. Olivia, are you saying, she nodded, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. Dr. Jenkins confirmed it yesterday. Come summer, there will be 3 of us at the Hayes Ranch. Ryker gathered her into his arms, his joy so palpable it brought tears to her eyes. I never thought I could be this happy, he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. You've given me everything I never knew I wanted. As have you, she replied, kissing him softly. From shame to honor, from loneliness to love. Spring arrived with new life across the ranch foals in the pastures, calves in the meadows, and the promise of their own child growing within Olivia. As her body changed, Ryker's tenderness toward her only increased, his protective instincts heightened by her pregnancy. One warm May afternoon, as Olivia rested on the porch swing, a familiar wagon approached along the drive. To her surprise, it was Mrs. Daly, Everett's widow, whom she hadn't seen since before that fateful day in the town square. Ryker emerged from the barn at the sound of approaching wheels, moving swiftly to the porch to stand near Olivia, his posture alert. It's all right, she assured him, struggling slightly to rise with her now visible pregnancy. I should hear what she has to say. Margaret Daly stepped down from the wagon, her black mourning dress replaced by a somber gray, her face thinner than Olivia remembered but composed. Mrs. Hayes, she began formally, I hope you'll forgive the intrusion. I've returned briefly to Willow Creek to finalize some business matters, and I couldn't leave again without speaking to you. Of course, Mrs. Daly, Olivia replied cautiously. Would you care to sit? The 3 settled on the porch, an awkward silence stretching between them until Mrs. Daly spoke again. I owe you an apology, she said directly. I believed the worst about you because it was easier than facing the truth about my husband. The truth, Olivia questioned, that he was inappropriate with other women. It wasn't the first time. Margaret Daly's hands twisted in her lap. I knew or suspected for years. But acknowledging it meant facing my own failure as a wife, so I chose ignorance. When he was killed and people pointed to you, it was convenient to believe it. Mrs. Daly, Olivia began, but the older woman continued. After I moved to Denver, I found letters in his papers from other women complaining of his behavior. One even mentioned how he'd spoken of you, saying you'd rebuffed him. She looked up, meeting Olivia's gaze directly. I should have stood up for you. Instead, I let them shame you for something that was never your fault. Ryker remained silent but reached for Olivia's hand, offering silent support as she absorbed this unexpected confession. Thank you for your honesty, Olivia said finally. It can't have been easy to come here today. No, Mrs. Daly agreed, but necessary. For my conscience, yes, but more importantly for justice. You deserved better from all of us. She glanced at Olivia's rounded belly. I see you found happiness despite everything. I'm genuinely glad for that. As the widow departed, Olivia leaned against Ryker's solid presence, emotionally drained but somehow lighter, as if the last shadows of that terrible time had finally been banished. Are you all right? He asked, his arm protective around her shoulders. Yes, she replied thoughtfully. Better than all right. It feels like the final piece falling into place, knowing she doesn't blame me, that she understands what really happened. You've shown remarkable forgiveness, Ryker observed, pressing a kiss to her temple. Life's too precious to waste on bitterness, Olivia said, placing her hand over the spot where their child had just kicked. Especially now. July brought scorching heat and the birth of their daughter, Rose Elizabeth Hayes, named for both their mothers. Olivia endured a difficult labor, but the moment the midwife placed the squalling infant in her arms, all pain was forgotten in the wonder of new life. Ryker's face, when he first held his daughter, reflected such tender awe that Olivia felt her heart might burst with love for them both. She has your eyes, he whispered, touching the downy red-gold fuzz on the baby's head, and maybe your spirit too. Heaven help us if she does, Olivia laughed weakly. One stubborn woman in the house is enough. I wouldn't have it any other way, he replied, sitting carefully beside her on the bed, their family complete. Word of Rose's birth spread quickly, and to Olivia's surprise, visitors from town began to arrive with gifts and well wishes. Even Mayor Thornton's wife came, bringing a hand-knitted blanket and awkward congratulations. "The town really has changed," Olivia remarked to Mrs. Abernathy, who had practically moved in to help with the baby for the first few weeks. "I never expected such kindness." "People can surprise you," the older woman replied sagely, "for better or worse. And you and Ryker have given them an example of what real loyalty looks like." As summer faded into another autumn, the Hayes family settled into a joyful rhythm centered around their growing daughter. Rose proved to be a happy baby with her mother's intelligence, and her father's calm disposition, though, when she did cry. Her powerful lungs suggested she'd inherited Olivia's determination as well. On the anniversary of their hasty wedding, Ryker surprised Olivia by arranging for Reverend Taylor to come to the ranch. "I thought we might renew our vows," he explained when she questioned him. "This time not out of necessity but purely from love, the way it should have been from the start." Touched beyond words, Olivia agreed, and on a perfect October afternoon, with baby Rose cooing in Mrs. Garcia's arms and a small gathering of friends as witnesses, they pledged themselves to one another again. This time, Olivia wore a proper wedding gown ordered from Denver, and Ryker slipped a diamond ring onto her finger to accompany the simple gold band she'd worn since that dramatic day in the town square. "I, Ryker, take you, Olivia, to be my wife," he vowed, his voice strong and sure. "Not from duty or compassion, but from the deepest love. I promise to stand beside you in all things, to honor your strength and independence, and to cherish every day we're given together." Olivia's eyes shimmered with tears as she responded, "I, Olivia, take you, Ryker, to be my husband. You saw worth in me when others saw shame, and courage when others saw scandal. I promise to love you faithfully, to partner with you honestly, and to build with you a family founded on respect and understanding." As they sealed their renewed commitment with a kiss, cheers erupted from their friends, and even Rose seemed to understand the significance of the moment, her tiny hands reaching toward her parents in delight. That evening, after their guests had departed and Rose slept peacefully in her cradle, Ryker and Olivia stood on the porch, watching stars appear in the deepening twilight. "Did you ever imagine, that day in the town square, that we'd end up here?" Olivia asked, nestled against his chest. "Not in detail," Ryker admitted, "but I knew from the moment you accepted my impulsive proposal that my life had changed forever. I just didn't realize how completely you would transform it." "We transformed each other," she corrected gently. "Your courage gave me a second chance, but your love gave me a home." He turned her in his arms, his expression serious in the fading light. "I want you to know something. I've never regretted it, not for a single moment. Standing up for you that day was the best decision I ever made. Even when I rearranged your perfectly organized tack room," she teased. "Even then," he laughed, "although that was a close call." They fell silent, content in each other's arms, the peaceful sounds of the ranch at dusk surrounding them, horses in the corral, night birds beginning their songs, the gentle creak of the porch swing in the evening breeze. "I was thinking," Olivia said after a while, "about opening a small school here on the ranch. Not just for Rose as she grows, but for the children of our workers and maybe some from neighboring ranches too. Many of them don't get proper schooling because they live too far from town." Ryker considered this. "The old bunkhouse could be converted. We don't use it now that the new one's built. It would need work, but by spring." "You think it's a good idea then?" she asked, touched by his immediate support. "I think you're a born teacher," he replied. "And I think those children would be lucky to learn from someone with your compassion and intelligence." His faith in her, unwavering since that first dramatic gesture in the town square, continued to be her greatest strength. Just as her belief in him had helped transform a solitary rancher into a devoted husband and father. "I love you, Ryker Hayes," she said simply. "And I love you, Olivia Hayes," he replied, "today, tomorrow, and all the days after." As darkness settled fully over the Colorado foothills, they returned inside to their sleeping daughter, and the warm heart of the home they had built together, a home founded not on convention or convenience, but on the purest understanding of what it meant to stand beside someone when the world stood against them. 5 years later, the Hayes Ranch School had become known throughout the county for its excellence, with Olivia teaching a dozen children of various ages, including their own spirited Rose and her 2-year-old brother James. The ranch itself had prospered, Ryker's horses sought after for their quality and temperament. The town of Willow Creek had changed too. The railroad had finally arrived, bringing new families and opportunities. Mayor Thornton had been voted out, replaced by a progressive businessman who valued education and fairness. The days of public shamings were relegated to an embarrassing chapter in local history that people mentioned only in hushed tones. On warm evenings, Ryker and Olivia still sat on their porch swing, watching their children play in the yard or listening to the distant thunder of horses in the pasture. Sometimes they spoke of the strange twist of fate that had brought them together: a tragedy, a scandal, a bold declaration in front of a judgmental crowd. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't ridden into town that day? Olivia asked once as they watched Rose teaching her little brother how to make a daisy chain. Sometimes, Ryker admitted. But then I look at what we've built together, and I know there could never have been any other path for us. Olivia squeezed his hand, marveling at how a moment of terrible shame had led to a lifetime of extraordinary love, proving that even in the wild uncertainty of the frontier, where justice was imperfect and society's rules sometimes cruel, two people of courage could forge their own destiny, turning judgment into joy and scandal into something sacred. "Then watch me marry her," he had declared to a town gathered to witness her shame. Neither of them could have imagined how completely that defiant promise would transform not just their lives, but an entire community's understanding of honor, forgiveness, and the true meaning of standing beside someone you love, no matter what the world might say.